Sir Pieter Paul Rubens was a Flemish Baroque painter, a proponent of an extravagant Baroque style that emphasized movement, color, and sensuality. Rubens is well known for his Counter-Reformation altarpieces, portraits, landscapes, and history paintings of mythological and allegorical subjects. In addition to running a large studio in Antwerp that produced paintings popular with nobility and art collectors throughout Europe, Rubens was a classically educated humanist scholar and diplomat who was knighted by both Philip IV of Spain and Charles I of England. Biography. Early life. Rubens was born in the city of Siegen, a Westphalia to Jan Rubens and Maria Pijplinks. His father, a Calvinist, and mother fled Antwerp for Cologne in 1568, after increased religious turmoil and persecution of Protestants during the rule of the Spanish Netherlands by the Duke of Alba. Jan Rubens became the legal advisor of Anna of Saxony, the second wife of William I of Orange, and settled at her court in Siegen in 1570. Fathering her daughter Christine, who was born in 1571. Following Jan Rubens' imprisonment for the affair, Pieter Paul Rubens was born in 1577. The family returned to Cologne the next year. In 1589, 2 years after his father's death, Rubens moved with his mother Maria Pijplinks to Antwerp, where he was raised as a Catholic. Religion figured prominently in much of his work, and Rubens later became one of the leading voices of the Catholic Counter-Reformation style of painting. Apprenticeship. In Antwerp, Rubens received a humanist education, studying Latin and classical literature. By 14 he began his artistic apprenticeship with Tobias Verhaag. Subsequently, he studied under two of the city's leading painters of the time, the late Mannerist artists Adam van Noort and Otto van Veen. Much of his earliest training involved copying earlier artists' works, such as woodcuts by Hans Holbein the Younger and Marc Antonio Raimondi's engravings after Raphael. Rubens completed his education in 1598, at which time he entered the Guild of St. Luke as an independent master. Italy. In 1600 Rubens traveled to Italy. He stopped first in Venice, where he saw paintings by Titian, Veronese, and Tintoretto, before settling in Mantua at the court of Duke Vincenzo I Gonzaga. The coloring and compositions of Veronese and Tintoretto had an immediate effect on Rubens's painting, and his later, mature style was profoundly influenced by Titian. With financial support from the Duke, Rubens traveled to Rome by way of Florence in 1601. There, he studied classical Greek and Roman art and copied works of the Italian masters. The Hellenistic sculptor Laocoon and his sons was especially influential on him, as was the art of Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci. He was also influenced by the recent, highly naturalistic paintings by Caravaggio. Rubens later made a copy of Caravaggio's Entombment of Christ and recommended his patron, the Duke of Mantua, to purchase The Death of the Virgin. After his return to Antwerp, he was instrumental in the acquisition of the Madonna of the Rosary for the St. Paul's Church in Antwerp. During this first stay in Rome, Rubens completed his first altarpiece commission, St. Helena with the True Cross, for the Roman Church of Santa Croce in Jerusalem. Rubens traveled to Spain on a diplomatic mission in 1603, delivering gifts from the Gonzagas to the court of Philip III. Rubens. Random House Webster's Unabridged Dictionary. H. C. Erich Middelfit, Mad Princes of Renaissance Germany, page 58, University of Virginia Press, the 22nd of January 1996. Retrieved the 2nd of February 2013. Belkin. 11-18. Held. 14-35. Belkin. 22-38. Belkin. 42-57. Belkin. 52-57. Belkin. 59. Sir Jacobs, Raymond, Antwerp and St. Pauluskerk. Rubens en de Mysteries van de Rozenkrans equals Rubens, et les Mystères du Rosaire equals Rubens and the Mysteries of the Rosary, Antwerpen. St. Paulus Vrienden, 2004. Rosen, Mark. The Medici Grand Duchy and Rubens' First Trip to Spain. Ut Holland. 147–152. CS1 maint. Date and year. While there, he studied the extensive collections of Raphael and Titian that had been collected by Philip II. He also painted an equestrian portrait of the Duke of Lerma during his stay that demonstrates the influence of works like Titian's Charles V at Moorburg. This journey marked the first of many during his career that combined art and diplomacy. He returned to Italy in 1604, where he remained for the next 4 years, first in Mantua and then in Genoa and Rome. In Genoa, Rubens painted numerous portraits, such as the Marchesa Brigia Spinola Doria, and the portrait of Maria di Antonio Serra Pallavicini, in a style that influenced later paintings by Anthony van Dyck, Joshua Reynolds and Thomas Gainsborough. He also began a book illustrating the palaces in the city, which was published in 1622 as Palazzi di Genova. From 1606 to 1608, he was mostly in Rome. During this period Rubens received, with the assistance of Cardinal Jacopo Serra, his most important commission to date for the high altar of the city's most fashionable new church, Santa Maria in Vallicella, also known as the Chiesa Nuova. The subject was to be St. Gregory the Great and important local saints adoring an icon of the Virgin and Child. The first version, a single canvas, was immediately replaced by a second version on 3 slate panels that permits the actual miraculous holy image of the Santa Maria in Vallicella to be revealed on important feast days by a removable copper cover, also painted by the artist. Rubens' experiences in Italy continued to influence his work. He continued to write many of his letters and correspondences in Italian, signed his name as Piero Paolo Rubens, and spoke longingly of returning to the peninsula, a hope that never materialized. Antwerp. Upon hearing of his mother's illness in 1608, Rubens planned his departure from Italy for Antwerp. However, she died before he arrived home. His return coincided with a period of renewed prosperity in the city with the signing of the Treaty of Antwerp in April 1609, which initiated the 12 years' truce. In September 1609 Rubens was appointed as court painter by Albert VII, Archduke of Austria, and Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia of Spain, sovereigns of the Low Countries. He received special permission to base his studio in Antwerp instead of at their court in Brussels, and to also work for other clients. He remained close to the Archduchess Isabella until her death in 1633, and was called upon not only as a painter but also as an ambassador and diplomat. Rubens further cemented his ties to the city when, on 3 October 1609, he married Isabella Brandt, the daughter of a leading Antwerp citizen and humanist, Jan Brandt. In 1610 Rubens moved into a new house and studio that he designed, now the Rubens Jewish Museum. The Italian-influenced villa in the center of Antwerp accommodated his workshop, where he and his apprentices made most of the paintings, and his personal art collection and library, both among the most extensive in Antwerp. During this time he built up a studio with numerous students and assistants. His most famous pupil was the young Anthony van Dyck, who soon became the leading Flemish portraitist and collaborated frequently with Rubens. He also often collaborated with the many specialists active in the city, including the animal painter Frans Snyders, who contributed the eagle to Prometheus Bound, and his good friend, the flower painter Jan Bruegel the Elder. Another house was built by Rubens to the north of Antwerp in the polder village of Dole, Huish, perhaps as an investment. The High House was built next to the village church. Altarpieces such as the Raising of the Cross and the Descent from the Cross for the Cathedral of Our Lady were particularly important in establishing Rubens as Flanders' leading painter shortly after his return. The Raising of the Cross, for example, demonstrates the artist's synthesis of Tintoretto's Crucifixion for the Scuola Grande di San Rocco in Venice, Michelangelo's dynamic figures, and Rubens' own personal style. This painting has been held as a prime example of Baroque religious art. Rubens used the production of prints and book title pages, especially for his friend Balthasar Mauritius, the owner of the large plant in Mauritius publishing house, to extend his fame throughout Europe during this part of his career. With the exception of a couple of brilliant etchings, he only produced drawings for these himself, leaving the printmaking to specialists, such as Lucas Forsterman, Paulus Pontius and Willem Panneels. He recruited a number of engravers trained by Christoffel Jegger, who he carefully schooled in the more vigorous style he wanted. He also designed the last significant woodcuts before the 19th century revival in the technique. Rubens established copyright for his prints, most significantly in Holland, where his work was widely copied through prints. In addition, he established copyrights for his work in England, France and Spain. The Merida, Medici cycle and diplomatic missions in 1621, the Queen Mother of France, Merida, Medici, commissioned Rubens to paint two large allegorical cycles celebrating her life and the life of her late husband, Henry IV, for the Luxembourg Palace in Paris. The Merida, Medici cycle was installed in 1625, and although he began work on the second series it was never completed. Marie was exiled from France in 1630 by her son, Louis XIII, and died in 1642 in the same house in Cologne where Rubens had lived as a child. After the end of the 12 Years' Truce in 1621, the Spanish Habsburg rulers entrusted Rubens with a number of diplomatic missions. While in Paris in 1622 to discuss the Merida, Medici cycle, Rubens engaged in clandestine information-gathering activities, which at the time was an important task of diplomats. He relied on his friendship with Nicolas Claude Fabry de Peresque to get information on political developments in France. Between 1627 and 1630, Rubens' diplomatic career was particularly active, and he moved between the courts of Spain and England in an attempt to bring peace between the Spanish Netherlands and the United Provinces. He also made several trips to the northern Netherlands as both an artist and a diplomat. At the courts he sometimes encountered the attitude that courtiers should not use their hands in any art or trade. But he was also received as a gentleman by many. Rubens was raised by Philip IV of Spain to the nobility in 1624 and knighted by Charles I of England in 1630. Philip IV confirmed Rubens' status as a knight a few months later. Rubens was awarded an honorary Master of Arts degree from Cambridge University in 1629. Rubens was in Madrid for 8 months in 1628 to 1629. In addition to diplomatic negotiations, he executed several important works for Philip IV and private patrons. He also began a renewed study of Titian's paintings, copying numerous works including the Madrid Fall of Man. During this stay, he befriended the court painter Diego Velázquez and the two planned to travel to Italy together the following year. Rubens, however, returned to Antwerp and Velázquez made the journey without him. His stay in Antwerp was brief, and he soon travelled on to London where he remained until April 1630. An important work from this period is the Allegory of Peace and War. It illustrates the artist's lively concern for peace, and was given to Charles I as a gift. While Rubens' international reputation with collectors and nobility abroad continued to grow during this decade, he and his workshop also continued to paint monumental paintings for local patrons in Antwerp. The Assumption of the Virgin Mary for the Cathedral of Antwerp is one prominent example. Rubens's last decade was spent in and around Antwerp. Major works for foreign patrons still occupied him, such as the ceiling paintings for the banqueting house at Inigo Jones's Palace of Whitehall, but he also explored more personal artistic directions. In 1630, 4 years after the death of his first wife Isabella, the 53-year-old painter married his first wife's niece, the 16-year-old Hélène Formant. Hélène inspired the voluptuous figures in many of his paintings from the 1630s, including the Feast of Venus, the Three Graces and the Judgment of Paris. In the latter painting, which was made for the Spanish court, the artist's young wife was recognized by viewers in the figure of Venus. In an intimate portrait of her, Hélène Formant in a fur wrap, also known as het pelsken, Rubens' wife is even partially modeled after classical sculptures of the Venus pudica, such as the Medici Venus. In 1635, Rubens bought an estate outside of Antwerp, the Steen, where he spent much of his time. Landscapes, such as his Château de Steen with hunter and farmers returning from the fields, reflect the more personal nature of many of his later works. He also drew upon the Netherlandish traditions of Pieter Bruegel the Elder for inspiration in later works like Flemish Kermis. Rubens died from heart failure, which was a result of his chronic gout on 30 May 1640. He was interred in St. Jacob's Church, Antwerp. The artist had 8 children, 3 with Isabella and 5 with Hélène. His youngest child was born 8 months after his death. Art. Rubens was a prolific artist. The catalogue of his works by Michael Jaffe lists 1,403 pieces, excluding numerous copies made in his workshop. His commissioned works were mostly religious subjects, and history paintings, which included mythological subjects, and hunt scenes. He painted portraits, especially of friends, and self-portraits, and in later life painted several landscapes. Rubens designed tapestries and prints, as well as his own house. He also oversaw the ephemeral decorations of the joyous entry into Antwerp by the Cardinal Infante Ferdinand in 1635. His drawings are mostly extremely forceful but not overly detailed. He also made great use of oil sketches as preparatory studies. He was one of the last major artists to make consistent use of wooden panels as a support medium, even for very large works. But he used canvas as well, especially when the work needed to be sent a long distance. For altarpieces he sometimes painted on slate to reduce reflection problems. His fondness of painting full-figured women gave rise to the terms Rubensian or Rubenesque for plus-sized women. Rubens was a great admirer of Leonardo da Vinci's work, using an engraving done 50 years after Leonardo started his project on the Battle of Vanghiari. Rubens did a masterly drawing of the battle which is now in the Louvre in Paris. The idea that an ancient copy of a lost artwork can be as important as the original is familiar to scholars, says Salvatore Settis, archaeologist and art historian. Pieter Paul Rubens works at the Royal Museums of Fine Arts, Antwerp, Belgium. Pieter Paul Rubens works at the Louvre. Pieter Paul Rubens works at the Victor Balaguer Museum. Workshop paintings from Rubens' workshop can be divided into 3 categories. Those he painted by himself, those he painted in part, and those he only supervised as other painters produced him from his drawings or oil sketches. He had, as was usual at the time, a large workshop with many apprentices and students, some of whom, such as Anthony van Dyck, became famous in their own right. He also often subcontracted elements such as animals or still life in large compositions to specialists such as Frans Snyders, or other artists such as Jacob Jordaens. Selected works. Early works. Portrait of a young woman with a rosary, Thyssen-Bornemusser Museum, Madrid c. 1609. Venus at the Mirror, 1615. Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia, 1615. Kunsthistorisches Museum, Vienna. Virgin in Adoration before the Christ Child, 1615. Diana returning from hunt, 1615. Gemälde Galerie Alter Meister. Tiger Hunt, 1617 to 1618. Hippopotamus Hunt. Rubens is known for the frenetic energy and lusty ebullience of his paintings. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus, 1617. Historical portraits. Portrait of Marchesa Brigia Spinola Doria, 1606. Portrait of King Philip IV of Spain, 1628–1629. Portrait of Elizabeth of France, 1628. Kunsthistorisches Museum, Vienna. Portrait of Ambrogio Spinola, 1627. National Gallery in Prague. Landscapes. The Chateau Hetstein with Hunter, 1635–8. Miracle of St. Hubert, painted together with Jan Bruegel, 1617. Landscape with the ruins of Mount Palatine in Rome, 1615. Landscape with milkmaids and cattle, 1618. Mythological nymphs filling the Horn of Plenty, 1615. Together with Jan Bruegel the Elder. The Birth of the Milky Way, 1636–1637. Madrid, Museo del Prado. Venus and Adonis. Jupiter and Callisto, 1613. Museums Landschaft of Hessen-Kassel. Marie de' Medici Cycle. Series on Maria de' Medici, The Flight from Blois. Maria de' Medici's arrival in Marseille. The Education of the Princess, from the Marie de' Medici Cycle. The Negotiations at Angoulême. Religious paintings. The Virgin of the Immaculate Conception, 1626–1628. Madrid, Museo del Prado. The Holy Family, 1630. Prado. The Feast of Herodes. King Solomon, 1617. Nude. Fortuna, 1638. Susanna and the Elders, 1608. The Triumph of the Virtue, 1608. Hygeia, 1615. Prague, Lokovich Palace. Hermit and Sleeping Angelica, 1628. Cimon and Ephigenia, 1615. Venus, Cupid, Bacchus and Ceres, 1612. Amor and Venus, 1614. Helena Formant and Related Pictures. Rubens with Hélène Formant and their son Pieter Paul, 1639, now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Helena Formant in wedding dress, Dietlge, the artist's second wife. Ca. 1630, now in the Alta Pinakothek. Helena Formant with a carriage, 1639. Louvre. Hélène Formant with Rubens and the Child, 1630. Venus and Cupid, 1640. Bathsheba at the Fountain, 1635. Venus, Mars and Cupid. Pastoral Scene, 1636. Drawings. Lion, c. 1614–1615. Black and yellow chalk, grey wash, heightened with white. Pieter Paul Rubens' son, Nicholas, 1619. Isabella Brandt, 1621. Pieter Paul Rubens, c. 1620s.